Right, there we go. I think I'm live on the right... Ah! That was bright. I think I'm live on the right stream now. Sorry about that, I opened the wrong stream first. So, we have some fairly significant news surrounding Leeds United, investment things, financial things, ownership things, all that kind of fun stuff. As you can tell, took me by surprise. I'm still hanging out in a snuddy from the morning. But I'm going to dive all the way through it, give you all the sort of information and news coming out of this thing, because it is a very, very dense article that has been put out by The Athletic. I'm just going to give you a little bit of an idea of just how dense this article is. So if we just pop this bad boy open immediately, and we just, yeah, it's fairly hefty. So we're going to sort of explain all of the context surrounding it, what it all sort of means, various explanation on various bits and bobs, and we'll see roughly what this means the plan is from the 49ers for Leeds United for the upcoming period of time, which I think is going to be quite fun and is going to be very, very informative. So, for the most part, I'm going to be doing this stream on this camera, so you guys are able to just sort of like ask questions and all that kind of stuff, but I'll be reading the information out and sort of passing it over in a digestible manner, which I will admit, I've cheated a little bit, and I've run it through a sort of text analysis-y thing to be like, hello, what does this actually mean? So hopefully that's all good. And it opens on a fairly strong stance, which is that Leeds United asked investors earlier in the summer, can we have a little bit more money, please, of investment? And when you do so, we will put that back into the football club. That was the general sort of pitch behind the entire thing, and that's what this document is. It's the presentation that was sent out to prospective investors for a general idea of, okay, what's actually going on here, and can you put a little bit of money into the club, and we'll put a little bit of money into the transfer market and help everything to grow and to benefit and all that kind of fun stuff. And it's turned out fairly sort of interesting. So the very basic original line of the thing is Leeds United owners have been carrying out their own marketing recently to persuade investors to give it £120 million to fund business operations, carry out the stadium expansion, and this is going to be important for Leeds fans particularly, to enable the club to bring in £300 million worth of players over the next 3 years. Now, over the next 3 years is the important bit, because a lot of that will be amortised stuff. It's going to be long term. A lot of people will look at the summer and go, why don't we just spend 200 now? Because PSR. But it has a basis in reality and good things, and that's fine. Some of you will be asking how it achieves to hope that... Sorry, I've been shouted at by my watch. Some of you will be asking how it intends to achieve that much bang for their buck, and then it's going to go into all the sort of 50-slide pitch deck on how the entire thing works, and they're going to explain the context and all that kind of stuff, and what all of this means. And it starts out with track record stuff, stating that they got 15% of leads early on, and then increased it from that point onwards. We knew this bit of the story. They'd popped in at Rad's time, proceeded to increase their investment, and eventually ended up buying the club. They've talked a bit about the 49ers as well, including stuff like Levi Stadium and the increase in enterprise value on the 49ers side, improvement in things on the Leeds United side. The basic sort of behind the scenes kind of stuff. But it does also go through stuff like operational expertise, because operational expertise is the kind of thing that you need when you're doing a football club, and it talks its way through various leadership hires, so particularly the hiring of Farker, operating officers, strategy officers, hiring Steinson, who is no longer... Is he Steinson still at Leeds? I don't quite know. But either way, the ability to hire in the right people for the right jobs, which is ultimately what you kind of want to see at Leeds United going forwards. But then we get to the juicy numbers, the numbers that we weren't 100% sure on, and the numbers that if you're an investor you look at and you go, oh, this stuff is really, really fun for us. And that's stuff like commercial growth. Commercial growth is what an investor will look at and go, this is why I'm investing in a football club, because this is where the revenue comes from. And if it's where the revenue comes from, they're going to be very much getting behind all of that, because, hell, you want a little bit of money coming in. If you've got any questions, by the way, whack them in the chat. That'd be massively appreciated. But such commercial growths include the sort of expansion digitally, like the digital footprint is the wording used in the article, increasing by around 40%. That just means sort of 40% more followers, click through, all that kind of stuff. Basically, Leeds doing better at online marketing than we were previously, because previously under Radrazani, we weren't particularly great at that. expanding into doing so a little bit more. The LUFC Spanish Twitter account is another example. Being better at being international is another fairly significant sort of aspect of it. Ticket revenue increasing by 40%. A lot of people will be very angry at that fact, which is completely understandable because, in essence, that just means that tickets are more expensive. But kind of makes sense. And retail income rising by 50%. That isn't just going to be prices, because obviously prices haven't risen by 50% in that time. Instead, a hell of a lot of that is going to be based on stuff like the shirts being a hell of a lot nicer. So last year's yellow shirt, for example, is going to be used as a big example by the 49ers. I got an itchy nose, sorry. Because that's a big sign of going, look, this is how well we've done once we've had a very, very big, very, very shiny product release that absolutely everybody adores, which is sort of what you need to have as a club that is looking to expand commercially, and hopefully that continues onwards for years to come. I've heard good things about next year's away kit already, but we'll get into that when we get into that. Hospitality income has more than doubled, which is absolutely essential as well, and obviously the Red Bull sponsorship, because we know that the Red Bull sponsorship is going to be incredibly valuable. We didn't know how valuable for quite some time, and we know that they had a minority stake in the club. Again, we still don't know how big that stake is. However, we do have some more information on just how valuable it is financially. So currently, that Red Bull sponsorship is worth 7 times the previous commercial shirt deal for any EFL club. And it's double what we were getting from SBO Top when we were in the Premier League, which is ridiculous numbers to be doing in the EFL. That is astounding statistics for effectively a shirt sponsorship, but it's a shirt sponsorship that is doing so massively well that it puts Leeds in basically the driving seat at the moment. It's a very good place to be as a club that's just gotten promoted. We'll be vastly outdoing Sunderland and Burnley on the sponsorship front, and a decent number of clubs at the bottom end of the Premier League. Then you go into recruitment stuff, and the recruitment stuff is quite fun. So 5 slides on recruitment, and the message is that Leeds have a proper plan. And I might do a separate video purely on this bit, because I think this bit is going to be worth a little bit of conversation. But in essence, the ownership group sets a budget, which obviously, football leadership, so that'll be Daniel Farker and Underwood and anyone else that works on the sort of scouting and footballing side, establishes non-negotiable technical and physical criteria, so things that have to be present in a player, which will be, in last summer's case, experienced, bit of height to them. And the data team refines the search for scouts to do the eye test. So that's a nice sort of funneling of, we make sure that we are looking at the right people first, and then that funnel gets thinner, and we make sure they've got the right sort of physicality to them, and the funnel gets thinner. Make sure that the data works, the funnel gets even thinner, and what's left, the scouting team take a very, very good look at and say, okay, these are the players that work best from that data set, which is a really nice way of looking at it. From that point, you have never fall in love with a player, be very strict with your process. All inbound players will have a projected exit value, which is quite nice. I quite like the idea that we're not just looking at players in, we're looking at players out. Because far too many times in the past, Leeds United have fallen into that trap of, okay, so what do we want in terms of our incoming players? By the way, there's no route out for them. Jack Harrison, Ilham Meslier. 2 prime examples of that where we don't really have a route for them to depart. And that will include having routes in the Championship, in case we end up there, and routes in the Premier League, in case we stick around here, which is the dream, let's be completely clear. And then they state the goal of becoming a top 5 English data club in 2025. That feels like that's one of those sort of word salad things, which kind of makes sense. I understand that you're going to be in a position of, like, say something to impress the investors. Not the easiest thing to do if you look at the fact that you've got the top 6 in front of you, and the Brentford and the Brighton and Palace are doing a lot of data stuff recently. But it's a good goal to have, in my opinion, which is nice. And then beyond that, they've expanded their player footprint, which is sort of where they're looking for scouting of players, from 40 to over 100 clubs, and are grading players on multiple sub-metric levels, including, for example, finishing with headers from set pieces, which explains the tall boys. So if you're looking beyond the original metric, which is just goals scored, okay, in what context do they score the goals, which is kind of big and important. The question of has it worked? Hell yeah. Effectively, we've found the exit prices for the likes of Georgie, for the likes of Archie Gray, and that means that, as it was listed in the article, the club was forced to sell £120 million worth of talent, replacing them with £27 million of new players, and they still finish first, which is a very good sign for that recruitment team. Then it goes through the investment opportunity thing, which is how you sell the club to these investors. If they put their money in, will they get money out? It's a fair question. And it's pretty fair in saying that, yeah, you'll get your money back, which, if you're an investor that wants your money back, fine. If you don't want your money back, as has been discussed with the Larry Nance Jr. stuff, also fine. We'll find out a little bit more about that. So, specifically, there is a slide that has the valuations of 12 teams from last season's Premier League in one column, with their annual revenues in another. Alongside these columns is a number for each club that represents the multiple used to get from the revenue to the value. Chelsea, for example, their valuation is 8.5 times their revenue. Bournemouth, their valuation is the same as their revenue. The average multiple, so the average sort of revenue to value multiplier from mid to low tier clubs, good morning Rich, hope you're well, is 2.2, which arguably Leeds United are approximately in that sort of range, being a sort of mid-ish Premier League club, if we are able to stick around at that point. 49ers think Leeds are about there, thanks to rich history, strong revenues, recent promotion, which, fair enough, if we are able to stay up, very, very valid point. To emphasise that point, there's another slide that looks at 7 recent transactions, including clubs in their peer group, full or partial takeovers, which puts clubs in that exact same range that the 49ers are saying this is what the club's value is. A couple of slides work backwards to the amount Leeds have already invested, so various club debts and things, so they've been working down the debt, which is quite a good thing to do. But all these snazzy accounting-y bits show that Leeds' approximate enterprise value at the moment was £565.45 million in 2023. That's a very specific number. Like, accountant people, how do you do what you do? Because these numbers are very precise, and I don't understand it. But is now £647.45 million, so an increase of £80-odd million in a 2-year period. Not too bad. There is the note of 120 million's gone in, the valuation is only 82 million more, but there is an explanation around that because it includes various player obligations, bits and bobs around that, which means that the club on the squad side has lost a little bit of value, but is looking a little bit better anyway. So, in essence, that 120 million is going to improving things in the future rather than accounting for the costs of the past, which, again, we're back to the Radrizzani on the credit card narrative that exists for quite a while, which is a fairly important thing that needs to be noted. We're expecting to book something like 260 million quid of revenue this season, which, if you're doing that 2.2 times multiplier, I'll just do the maths very quickly in my head, would be 520... high 500 million, so 580-ish, off the top of my head. But then again, that's me maths. I'm not 100% sure how accurate that is going to be. Yeah, there's the 576 million. 580, that's not bad maths. In terms of growth strategy, it's got various bits and bobs about how the club will expand and develop and grow in the coming months and years and all that kind of stuff. So it's looking at a new inner city academy to reach a demographic with a high potential. That I like. I like the idea that we were looking at that a couple of years ago. I like the idea that we're still looking at that now, because Thorpe Arch, being miles away from the city centre, isn't going to be great in the slightest, because it means that city centre kids that maybe can't afford transport on a consistent basis aren't having to pay for transport on a daily basis to try and push their way into a football club that they have the ability to play in. Having that city centre base for the club also sort of integrates the club with the community. It means that players are seen more often. It means that people are able to sort of hop in, hop out, all that kind of stuff. You can maybe, if you're in the club's perspective, say, we're booking out pitches at the academy, which is not a bad thing to do. all sorts of routes for revenue there and all sorts of routes for community growth, which is ultimately just beneficial for the club. Further benefits include mentions of summer tours abroad to include club revenue. We knew that that was already a thing, going to Sweden, going to Ireland, but potentially going to America. That might not happen next year. Just an important note, I know a lot of people were saying, why don't Leeds get involved in the Premier League summer tour things? Firstly, because we're not particularly secure in the Premier League yet. Secondly, because the World Cup is in America next summer. And I think it's going to be a very, very tough sell to say, well done, players, you've just been to America, and then you've come back to the UK. How about you go to America again? That sounds like jet lag up the wazoo. So hopefully you're not doing that to your players. That could be a little bit of a worry. Making sure Thorpe Arch is still fit for purpose, so the main training base would still be outside the city, but again, you've got that sort of younger base within the city, which I think is a good idea. Making some money from ancillary real estate around the ground, so that is sort of monetising the commercial space around Elland Road, which is going to be very important given the redevelopment. And ultimately, I think we'll be heading in the right direction. There is mention of a potential exit, though. But I will get to that in a moment, because there were more slides about the strategy. One's about making Leeds the club of choice for Gen Z, which I think is a little bit of a weird one. It's sort of pandering to the looser fan base, which is more of your sort of casualsy people, which is potentially not perfect, but that's fine. Increasing the scouting networks are looking all over the shop now, so it specifically mentions England and 8 European countries as primary markets. I will try and work out what those 8 countries are. Off the top of your head, you can probably guess most of them, so you'll be looking at, we'll do it now. You'll have the big 5, which will be England, obviously, but it's England and 8 others, so England as 1. There'll be Spain, Italy, Germany, France. That's your big 5 leagues. Portugal, probably. Add Netherlands, because that's a fairly big league. Austria is a developing league. And then I'd say one of Belgium or Scotland. Probably Belgium, higher standard than Scotland across the board, but you know how it is. It's fine. Slide on the Academy development plans is the most revealing in terms of new information, as it outlines a 3-pronged approach: replenish, retrain, and sustain. Retain, not retrain. My bad. Replenishing done by a £500,000 annual budget for filling gaps in the academy pathway with talented youngsters from local rivals, so basically plucking the best out of Bradford, Huddersfield, Sheffield United, Sheffield Wednesday. There are decent players that come through those youth sides, and having a specific budget for that, very nice. I like it. Doing what Man City do nationally on a local level is something that just makes a little bit of sense in my opinion. Plus an additional £100,000 a year scouting budget to find those players. It says European nations. I would agree Brazil, but it does specifically say European nations. The Americas and Far East are considered screening markets, which is where we periodically do surveillance-y bits. However, and this is a very important weird note, as we acquire more clubs, so as the 49ers look to South America, as they look to maybe North America, maybe to Japan, I'm not 100% sure. As we acquire more clubs, secondary and screening markets, so secondary being Scotland as an example, Rangers, will become primary markets, so places that you just look permanently for scouting, which I think is very, very, very interesting. Looking anywhere and everywhere absolutely makes sense. Back on the academy bits, retainment will be improved by spending £3 million on Thorpe Arch and ring-fencing £250 per year for expenses. Absolutely needs doing. Strengthens Thorpe Arch as a developing academy. Make sure that things are improving at Thorpe Arch. Very, very nice. And the £2 million inner city facility will help sustain and potentially increase the club's current output of high-value academy products every 2 years. Well, specifically, one high-value academy product every 2 years, which is an improvement over what we were doing. Because if you look into sort of the late Radrizzani era, the players that were coming through at Leeds were Somerville, they were Strauch. Not a ton more from the academy, which means that the academy output was far less than one every 2 years. At the moment, Harry Gray, Archie Gray. I'm going to call that one every 2 years. If we can keep that going, as I have a theory that we will from a couple of bits that I've heard, but I don't think I am able to discuss, it could be quite good to see. And I think we'll be able to keep that ratio up, but we'll see. To underline why that's a sound investment, there's a table that shows if Leeds can sell an academy player for £22 million, which is half the amount they got for Gray last year, it will cover the cost of 4 years of enhanced academy expenditure with a profit of £13.6 million. So in terms of just a single sale of £9 million covers off the academy for 4 years, which is a good thing. If we're investing in the academy and we're able to sell players for a decent sum of money, that keeps it funded, which is good. And it means that it's absolutely a sustainable thing to do. Then it gets into various bits on Elland Road plans. Expanded west and south stands will be ready for fans in August 2028, which is a reasonably quick turnaround for a massive sort of expansion thing. We need the Gray family to keep breeding. Oh, I'm sure they will. We'll find out. The question is, if Archie has a kid, what academy is he coming through? This is why we need to hold on to some of our Greys, because otherwise they're going to be coming through the Spurs academy, and we can't have that. No date is given for Phase 2 start or completion, but it's meant to take the capacity to 53k, which, as we know, is sort of an understood thing. Adds 30 million to the incremental annual revenue, which is basically matchday revenue. Good thing to have on board. If you assume the Premier League's going to settle on a squad cost ratio of 85%, which is the new version of PSR, that's an extra 25 million quid a year to spend on players, which is not bad in the slightest. Then a couple of graphs showing off Brighton and Brentford's sort of profitable data-driven approach to things, which is an important thing to pay attention to, without a doubt, because that's sort of keeping us absolutely on track in terms of that. We look to use a similar approach, but, and this is kind of important, Leeds think they can get there even quicker thanks to greater commercial revenue and a larger fan base, which I like. I like the fact that we're doing the Moneyball stuff. I enjoy it. And then you get to the final chapter. The final chapter is finance. And finance is surprisingly important in the world of football because that decides whether you can do shit or you can do nothing. And hopefully we're able to do shit. But we'll find out in this chapter. It sets out a base case and a low case scenario. The base case is what is hoped for, is Premier League. So Leeds earned £141 million in the Championship last season and are forecast to make 262 this season, rising to 271 next season, 273 in 27-28, if we stay up. That's the worry. Staying in the Premier League is the difference maker here, but we knew that. We'll continue onwards. Club costs last season were £174 million, which is quite high. That includes a very, very big wage bill, agent fees, transfer fees, all that kind of stuff. I think this is new data, but we'll see. That rises to 214 million this season, 200 next season, which is down a little bit, and then back to 215 the season after. If we can stay within that sort of disciplined set of numbers, very nice. This explains why we're being very set on the transfer fees, because we've got this long-term plan of this is what is budgeted. Big sales adjust the budget. We know that. We didn't make any of those. So we're sticking in the budget. Net transfer spend last season was 13 million. Estimate of 52 for this season, then 56, then 68. So we are looking to net spend, but that will again require players in through the door, which hopefully, well, out through the door. That's the other way around, which hopefully we're able to achieve. That'd be absolutely wonderful. But the plan is to spend increasing amounts to cement the Premier League status, and if you add up the annual cash flows for those 4 seasons, you get a deficit of £118 million. In other words, the £120 million that was mentioned as the investor goal, which is sort of important. The notes for these numbers point out that ticket prices will rise after promotion, which we know that's happened. A conservative 16th place finish is projected. That's what the club is expecting. Right, we'll jot that down. We'll keep that in mind. Someone make a note of that. The club is projecting that we come 16th, which, if we're able to do so, wonderful. Followed by back-to-back 15th places. That's the projection. And the wage bill will remain near the average for 10th to 15th. So we are looking to... Because this is a clever little bit of sort of like football finance, right? I did a bit of reading into this. If you have a look at the success and failure of football clubs in recent years, It's not defined by the amount of money that you spend on players. Sort of. It's not defined by transfer fees, it's defined by your wage bill. So wage bill has so much of a tight correlation to your ability to succeed in modern football that it's worth keeping a very, very close eye on. Because if you end up spending a lot on the wage bill, you know you've got decent quality players because those players can demand high wages, and all of that starts to add up and the numbers make sense and all that kind of stuff. That's why I think signing players on a free is very interesting, and I'm not too bothered about the low fees for players. That's something that I'm okay with. Because transfer fee isn't necessarily a tracker of player quality in the way that people expect. It's a tracker of player interest and club reluctance to sell, which is a fun little bit of data. They also estimate, and this is fun, that the new independent football regulator will cost Leeds £5 million. I don't know how that works. I'm going to have a look into it, but we'll see. There is also a reference, and this is spooky, to the fact that the average Premier League manager's tenure is 18 months. Therefore, this is going to get people. This is going to get a certain chunk of the fan base rock hard. Contingencies are in place for periodic new hires. Yes, they are planning for the eventuality that Daniel Farke doesn't stick around. A lot of people will hear that and go, Daniel Farke's on the way out. No, it's recognising the reality of the situation. That means that there will be money set aside in case various payoffs need to be done in terms of contract value, all that kind of stuff. No need to fear Farke outers. There's something in place for you guys. The base case player spend, which is sort of the standard, is mapped out in surprising detail with amounts given for each position. Ooh, this is fun. I didn't know this bit. This could be incredibly fun. Leeds projected to spend £101 million on players this season. Roughly the same amount. Comprised of £25 million on a striker. That one didn't happen. £60 million on a centre-back. We did do that. We did do that for Beale. All the way down to £3 million on a young goalkeeper. And £200,000 for agent fees on a veteran loan midfielder. That feels like Calvert-Lewin. Because I know he's not a midfielder, but I think we said we can reallocate the £25 million for a striker to various other positions. Calvert-Lewin doesn't have an agent. Veteran striker. That makes sense. That adds up. Well, I say adds up. That in brain works, I think. Then projected additions for 26-27 are £126 million. So that is a bigger net spend than this summer, which isn't something we got under Radrizzani. Radrizzani we knew was relatively low on cash, and let's be honest, fucked the PSR. The fact that we're doing bigger additions next season, very nice. I like to see it, and it means that even in the event that we go down, we've got money for projected additions. The amount that we are spending on projected additions only goes down in 27-28, and that's in the event that we don't sell anyone, I think. There are also totals for the next two seasons. I've just run you through those, but there aren't position-by-position breakdowns for those, presumably because position-by-position breakdowns for that would be incredibly naive and would put you in a bit of a weird spot where it's like, well, we don't know who's leaving, so we don't want to overly commit to things. Even more surprisingly, Leeds got very close to hitting these estimated fees this summer. According to Transfermarkt, the club spent just under £100 million, spending a little more than intended on midfielders, not the same amount on strikers. We did overinvest. We did heavily invest in the midfield. That makes a lot of sense to me. Good morning, Mr. P. How are you doing? The low case projections are based on a 17th place finish this season. The fact that struggling teams rotate coaches more often, so that is basically saying if things are looking bad, we have numbers in place to say if we need to replace Daniel Farke. If these calamities unfold, the revenue projections, total cost and net transfer balances will be a little lower too, with cumulative cash flow balance being higher at £161 million by the summer of 2028. So in essence, there's a little bit of pressure that is being squeezed on Leeds United by if things go the wrong way. If things go the right way and we are able to stay up this season, fantastic. Plenty of revenue in. We know what the projected spend is going to be next season, which I don't know if it's... a bad thing that external people are now aware of this, but it's a thing that we can be aware of and take note of, and I will be taking a lot of notes from this for future reference. But it does also say that we're not planning to dip into the market in January because we've used what our sort of projected spend was going to be. But that is everything that came out of that particular article. That was a very detailed article. There's a reason I really like Matt Slater's work on The Athletic, and it's because Matt Slater goes into depth. And it's a level of depth that I am a big fan of. And it also shows that the club are going into depth, which is sort of what we need. We need a club that is able to, and I know that a lot of people don't like it, and I know that a lot of people are just like, this isn't real football, but the ability to dive into all of those little nitty-gritty details and all of the behind-the-scenes stuff that isn't the most fun thing to talk about, but is a necessity to discuss, which I kind of enjoy. But it was a very, very good insight into the direction of the football club, what we can expect going forwards, and ultimately how things are going to land in the coming weeks, months, years, all that kind of stuff. Basically, nice insight to have. Let's see if we're able to follow it. I'm going to end that stream there, having just done sort of the information that is in the thing itself. What's the word for thing? Article itself. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to ping you all over to Mr. Wayneman, who I believe is still doing his stream. I had to get this one out relatively quickly because I have a meeting at 11:30, so I'm very sorry, Joe. I didn't mean to clash, but we kind of had to this time. But I'm going to ping you over in that direction. If you enjoyed the stream, pop a like on it. That'd be massively appreciated. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Become a channel member as well. That's massively appreciated. And that £2.99 might go to my personal transfer fee. And it means that... greetings to you too, young master. Lovely to see you. But it means that my own personal transfer budget will increase by £4 due to amortization of the amount of money that I spend on KFC. I think that's how it works at the very least. Anyway, hope you all enjoyed. I'm going to quickly set up that redirect. There we go. Let's head over to Joe Wayman's stream. Let's shout about... in fact, we're going to shout about cheese. We're going to send a message. £120 million in the cheese budget. Brilliant. That's going to be fantastic. Hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you later. Toodaloo, guys.